sure. I don't think I'll give my whole name though. My mother only calls me that. So. My name's Matt. I'm 43. I'm originally from South Africa.
How long have you been a Christian for?
That would depend on what you call a Christian, I suppose. So I gave my life in, not very good with dates, so you're going to have to forgive me on that. But it was around about 2006, 2007. But I, through my own fault of not pressing in and sort of searching for the Holy Spirit and for the gifts of the Spirit and pressing into the Bible, I just carried on. I thought, well, hey, you know what, I've gone up there, I've said the prayer, I'm saved, I can carry on living the same life as I've always lived, which isn't necessarily how it works. But yeah, I did that for probably about another 2 years after that. So I would say I got saved then, but in terms of being a Christian, probably the last 5 or 6 years.
So being a Christian, as in living out what it is to be a Christian, would you say the last 5 or 6 years, is that what you mean?
Absolutely, yeah. Seeing sort of fruit, if I can put it that way. So yeah, soaking myself in the Holy Spirit, soaking myself in the truth of the Bible, and sort of living out what we're called to do, instead of just, I think initially it was more like a sort of grace ministry type thing. It's like, okay, right, I've given my life, now I can carry on doing whatever I've been doing, I'm saved, everything's hunky-dory, I don't need to do anything for it. But it took a long while to manifest in me that it's like, you know what, this isn't something you don't just say a prayer and that's it, it's done. That's the starting point. From there you start growing in your Christian life, and the more you grow in your Christian life, the more the Holy Spirit pours out of you into other people's lives, which I think is ultimately what the aim is. It's for one person to receive it and then to pass it on to another and pass it on to another and pass it on to another, so that the word gets spread.
And can you just tell us a little bit about life before being a Christian and how you came to know Jesus?
So I was born into a predominantly Catholic household. So my father's side of the house was Catholic. My mother's side of the house was Methodist, although I never saw them go to church except on Christmas Day. My father was quite, I wouldn't say a staunch Catholic, his parents were, but so that was my sort of Christian understanding. They were divorced when I was quite young. My mother remarried. My father passed away when I was 14. And at the time I didn't recognize it, but now that I look back, I think that actually had quite an impact on my life. And I started pretty much kicking out against everything. I was kicked out of school at the age of 16. At the age of 17 I left home. I'd had a bit of a fallout with my stepfather. Didn't speak to my family for about 2 years. Just sort of ran away, never saw them, didn't speak to them, stayed away altogether. Went into the army. I had been dabbling in cigarettes and smoking weed and what have you from about the age of 14, but it never really became a major part of my life. Went into the army, and that's where it sort of started escalating. I was, quite frankly, stoned all day, every day, from then on until till the age of about 30. In fact, no, closer to 35. So yeah, I think from the army things just sort of manifested, and I've had people tell me that, oh yeah, you were self-medicating and not dealing with your issues, and and what have you. But long story short, I became addicted to weed. I've done coke, I've done ecstasy, I've done acid, I've never stuck a needle in myself, thank heavens. But anything else that you can snort or swallow a tablet for to get high, I've pretty much done it. But weed was always the one that well and truly had its hooks in me. That was something I just could not get away from. No matter how much I tried, I just couldn't get away from it. It had its hooks truly in me. I used to go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings because my wife thought I was doing the good thing and trying to get off of it, just because I knew it was an easy way to smoke on the way home. And I would have the freedom to go and then do what I wanted to do. I had no interest in sort of getting off of it. Although I did, but I didn't, if that makes any sense. But it was an escape. So, yeah.
And after the army, what happened?
After the army, I came out, and I think I'd just been so accustomed to getting stoned all the time that just continued. Obviously, I never started smoking the stuff to become an addict. I started smoking it because it was an escape from life, I suppose, essentially. And it was there. It was readily available. It was free. So it was easy. There was other guys around me smoking it, and we were all sort of doing this thing. Most of them came out of the army and managed to kick it and carry on with life as per normal. But unfortunately for me, I couldn't kick it. This had just become I wouldn't say important, but an integral part of my life. It was something that I did. It was almost part of my identity as to who I was. So yeah, that just carried on right throughout. I mean, through work, I'd get stoned in the morning before I went to work. I get stoned in the afternoon, get stoned in the evening, get stoned the night before I go to bed, wake up the next day, do it all over again. So yeah.
And being married with 2 boys, did that have any ramifications on your relationships?
Absolutely. I met my wife when I was quite young. I was 18 when I met her. She was 16. We started a family very young. So our first son was born very young. She was 18. I was 20. And prior to that, I mean, I don't think the weed smoking was a problem. She just thought it was a phase. She didn't know my entire backstory. So it wasn't an issue. But after Shay came along, it started becoming an issue. I mean, she's a young woman at the time, granted, but a woman nonetheless, and all her motherly instincts kicked in. And she was like, well, you shouldn't be doing this anymore. You're a father now. You need to be sort of like getting on with life and providing for us and being a role model for your kids. She just, I don't think she didn't understand at the time, and neither did I. I wasn't really looking to stop, but she didn't understand just how deep the hooks were in me at that stage already. So yeah, it was difficult. Had our ups and downs, obviously, but as time went by, there was more downs than ups. So addiction is horrible. Firstly, because you actually have no control over it, and those that have never been addicted to anything before won't be able to understand that. But it also makes you extremely selfish. It's all about me, because I need that, whatever it might be, whether it's drugs, pornography, alcohol, what have you. Addiction is addiction. It's just 2 different things, but it still does the same thing. So for me, being addicted to weed meant that was my top priority in my life. I've actually been to a few sort of seminars, if you can call it that, on addiction, and it changes your brain. So in your brain you have a hierarchy of what's important and what's less important. So house, food, etc. are normally the sort of top ones. if you look at the brain of an addict, whatever it is that their addiction is becomes the number one on that hierarchy of things that's important, and everything else then fits underneath that. So as long as they can get that, then the rest of the stuff they'll deal with as and when required, which is clearly not good for a marriage or any sort of relationship, quite frankly, because it's all about getting that first, and then you'll put time into the other stuff as and when you can. But when you're stoned, you can't put time into anything else because you're kind of not really there. So so it affected our relationship badly. It affected my relationship with her, it affected my relationship with my kids, it affected my relationship with my in-laws. I wouldn't necessarily say it affected my relationship with my family because I don't really see them, but it had a major impact on my life, and the fact that I had no control over it made it more difficult. So as far as she was concerned, just stop. But I couldn't just stop because I didn't know how to stop, and quite frankly didn't want to stop. So it became very difficult. And then because I spent so much time smoking and getting stoned, it affected my work life. So holding down a job wasn't necessarily that difficult, but getting a decent enough job to earn a decent enough income became difficult. Applying the time, being in sales at the time, you need to apply a lot of time in it. So I had a lot of my time was mine to manage. I managed it very badly, and so therefore income was not what it could have been. So that put more strain on us, and then add to the fact that I'm not earning a lot of income, but what I am earning I'm using to go out and buy more drugs. It just snowballs on you, and that sort of pressure on any relationship is going to break it eventually. It might take longer in some cases, shorter in others, but it's eventually going to break it. There's no two ways about it. And that's where we ended up. We ended up fighting all the time. I wouldn't even try and count the number of times that Michelle and I have separated and come back together and separated and come back together. But as long as the weed was there, it was never going to change. It was just the same cycle that we kept on going through over and over and over again, which for two young kids is not good. There's just no security in it. And I just thank God that my boys have come out as sort of level-headed as they are, considering the upbringing that they've come through. It's been horrendous for them, I can imagine. But I just thank heavens they are as level-headed as they are, considering what they were given. Not a very comfortable place to be at all. And so that's how I ended up coming over to the UK, because I messed things up so badly in South Africa. I needed to come here to earn money to basically fill in a massive big hole that had been created by my mismanagement of life. So that's what I did. Came over here and then said to Michelle, right, I'm working now, I'm earning money, let's start getting things to come over. And she was like, no ways. Why on earth would I want to leave a country where I have my friends, my family, to come over to a country where I have nothing but you, going on the type of person that she knew I was, which didn't make sense to me then. I can understand it now. And I was like, oh, you're just a terrible mother, you should be looking out for the best interests of your kids, and it's better here, blah blah blah. Anyway, long story short, we ended up having a major bust up about that. And she said, right, you know what, that's it, I don't need this in my life anymore, you go your way, I'll go mine, I'm done. Which kind of had me rock bottom, as selfish as I was and what have you with the addiction. I've always loved her, and that's never going to stop. So that for me was just like a knife in the heart, really. So phoned her brother-in-law, or my brother-in-law, sorry, not hers, her brother, my brother-in-law, and said, look, this is the situation. And he said, well, I'll pray with you. So he prayed with me. Phoned me back a few hours later, said, right, I found a church for you in Dominion Theatre in London. You go there. So I did. And that was a great time for me, because it was that 2 years of not having Michelle there, which was hard, but it took me away from everything that I knew in South Africa and gave God an opportunity to actually start working on me, and correcting so many things that were very clearly wrong in my life. So that was good. It was a very good 2 years for me. Connected with a small group, and just before I went back to South Africa in 2010, although I had been baptized as a Catholic youngster, I just felt God saying, you need to be baptized. So I got him to baptize me, which was nice. I enjoyed that. It was great. And then went back to South Africa. Michelle saw that I was a changed person. I wasn't the same person that she knew 2 years prior. And so, yeah, we got back together. Things started going well again. Excuse me. But, yeah, familiar places bring back familiar behaviors and patterns. And so it was about a year after being back in South Africa that I slowly started drifting back into my old ways. And yeah, it's incredible how the enemy, you make one small little slip up, a little crack in the door is small enough for the enemy to jump in and start convicting you. And I fell prey to that. As I said, I'd been in familiar sort of surroundings, the same friends that I'd had before. So yeah, a lot of them were still smoking and doing drugs and carrying on. And initially I didn't partake. But yeah, eventually I was like, well, you know what, I've got this licked. I can have a drag or two and it's not going to affect me. But that's all it takes. And he's in there and he starts convicting you. It's like, how can you call yourself a Christian? How can you go to church and associate with these people when you know that you were smoking weed the other day? So I started sort of stepping back from church, because now I felt that I wasn't good enough to be there. But then started smoking weed again, and so yeah, about a year after being back in South Africa, started slipping down that road again. And lo and behold, before you know it, it had its hooks in me again. Unfortunately, once you're an addict, you'll always be an addict. Same old. Michelle and I started going through the same motions and driving down the same road again. So yeah, that just ended up in the same situation. It wasn't good for either of us. We split up again. I did eventually get back into church, which was good, because I needed to. We were separated for probably it was about 6 to 8 months before I came over to the UK. But we had started repairing our relationship again. It was just a question of circumstance that we still ended up being separated. We saw each other all the time, but just lived in different places. So yeah, I came over here, and I would say the last 3 years of being back in the UK, for us as a couple, for us as a family, and for me personally, have been probably the most productive years of our relationship. I mean, Michelle and I met in 1994, so what's that? 23 years ago? 24 years ago? And these last 3 years have been the smoothest, most productive years in our life, and that's where we've both been planted in church, focused on God, and He's just been able to work with us.
You're over here. You're in a church. It's been a good 3 years. Does that mean that your life is now sorted and drugs on an issue and everything's great? What does it look like?
It's funny you mention that. We were just joking around the other night, and Michelle was saying, "Oh, I want to go to a music concert." Let me put a bit of background. I don't like music concerts. People step into my space and they bump me around. The only music concert I've ever enjoyed was UB40 when I was about 20 years old. Again, I was stoned. That's why it was so good. So I said to her, well, as a joke, I said, well, that's fine. We'll go to a music concert, but we'll go in Amsterdam. She said, well, why do you want to go there? I said, well, no, I'll be stoned again. It'll be all good. I won't mind people stepping into my space. And she said, well, do you really want to risk that? And the truth of the matter is, no, I don't. It's taken a number of times of falling off of the wagon because I thought that I could handle this, for me to realize that I can't handle it. And so therefore I cannot put myself in that situation again. So I can't go to Amsterdam and sit in a coffee shop or anything like that, for starters. But I also need to keep myself, or keep my relationship with the Lord and the Holy Spirit as open and close as I possibly can, because it's only through Him that I am able to not do drugs on a daily basis. I don't have the strength to stop this on my own. I've tried it numerous times. I remember driving down a road to my dealer, incidentally, when we were having one of our sort of bad spells, saying to myself, what the heck are you doing? You know this stuff is destroying your life, it's destroying your marriage, it's destroying your career, but you're still going to do it anyway. Why don't you just turn around and go home? And I was unable to turn around and go home. I had to go and finish what I was going there for. So I know that I can't do this on my own strength. So it's only through the grace of God and the Holy Spirit that I'm able to sort of lead the life that I'm currently leading. And so church is an integral part of my life. Fellowship and close relationship and accountable relationships with friends within the church are an integral part of my life. And so yeah, that's what life looks like now. Life is now about going and doing my job during the day, but staying as close to God as I can and having accountable relationships with people at church. I've spoken to a few of them, and I've said to them, the day I'm not here is the day you phone me and you find out where I am and what am I doing, because I need that accountability. Because if I slip, I need somebody who's going to come find me and say, listen, let's get you back on the wagon again.
So through the time of your addiction, that must, as you said, it had an effect on your family. How does your family see you now?
I can't speak for the boys, because I must be honest, it's not something that I've ever spoken to them about. It's embarrassing, to be honest, and it makes me very vulnerable in front of my children, which is a very, very awkward and uncomfortable position to be in. But it's probably a conversation I'm going to need to have one day. I've discussed it with Shay. He hasn't mentioned anything, but that's only because Shay has had similar issues. So I've discussed it with him from a I've been there, you don't want to do that sort of perspective. He's older. I haven't discussed it with Reese at all, but obviously one day I'm going to need to. So the only person I've really spoken to about it with is Michelle. Yeah, I mean, she is, I don't know how to put it, shocked isn't quite the right word, sort of just amazed, I suppose, by the change that the Holy Spirit has been able to make within me, but not just within me, within us as a couple. In 3 years is a relatively short space of time, so yeah, it's been good, and as I say, it's amazing that he has done it.
You're now in the UK with your family. You're settled in a job. You're settled in a church. What does tomorrow look like for you?
Tomorrow looks like very uninteresting, I suppose. It looks like more of the same, but we'll see. I'm open to whatever God has got up for me in the future. He's definitely been stretching me and putting me into a position with more influence, sort of within the church, and to a degree within my career as well. I don't know where that's going to lead to, but I'm open to all options and all possibilities, and we'll just see where he's going to lead me to. But essentially, for myself and Michelle, it's more of the same. It's more of focusing on God and staying close to Him, because He's the one that keeps us together, and He's the one that keeps me clean.